Microphone check 1 2. What is this? The JBP boys are back in business. Okay, so I watched yesterday's episode of the Joe Budden podcast, and the episode was entitled Shaking the Tree, which I feel like Joe Budden titled that because that was his theme he was trying to illustrate throughout this presentation. And, I've heard everyone's reactions on the video on yesterday's episode. Mr. Teleferro, shout out to him. He talked about it. Here's my opinion. From what I gathered from that episode, I feel like there's still some mixed feelings and emotions and messages that they need to work out. Okay. And two, I felt like a lot of resentment, a lot of jealousy, miscommunication. I also felt entitlement, self-entitlement throughout that whole episode. And before I crack into and dissect yesterday's episode, I first like to state this for the record. I feel like all three of these gentlemen handled it the wrong way. Okay, Rory and Maul, they handled it the wrong way. Joe Budden handled it the wrong way. And I felt like I felt like if there was an understanding, a direct understanding, I felt like they wouldn't have gotten to this point. Okay. And two, another thing I gathered from this is, and I'm a firm believer in this, and maybe a lot of people are not firm believers of this, you should never mix business with pleasure. You should never mix business with family or friends. You can't work with your family and friends. Okay? You simply can't. And the Joe Budden podcast illustrates that. All right? Because the reason why I say that is people would use words like, I'm your friend. We're family. Okay? More so than it's a business. It's a job. Okay? I feel like business and family should never be in the same sentence. All right? So let's get into yesterday's episode, Shaking the Tree. The boys came back. The boys are back in town. And everyone was telling their side of the story. Maul, let's start with Maul. He felt like he was a little betrayed by Joe Budden. And he was upset at the fact that Joe Budden told him that, quote, the podcast is not your concern. The business is not your concern. All right. Rory, I felt like there was some tension between him and Joe Budden, and you can feel the tension in the air. Not a month ago, but this has been going on and transpiring for some point of time. Okay, it's just boiled over to the point of, even though they say that it wouldn't have went there, I felt like it possibly could have went there where some hands would have been involved. All right. And when you talk about Joe Budden is, saying that this baby is his. The Joe Budden podcast is his and his alone. And he makes all the decisions. Okay. And he has final say so. Okay. And I felt like there was, and when you listen to these guys, I felt like there's etiquette. There was no etiquette involved for the employee and the employer. And I felt like lines were blurred even before we got to this point. I felt like Joe Budden should have already established this to the two, that this is his IP. He's the boss. He has final say so on any type of decisions concerning the business of the Joe Budden Network. All right? Yes, we're boys. Yes, we're family. Yes, we're friends. But at the end of the day, when we get in this squared room, or when we talk or conduct business, he has final say-so on that. Now, I'm pretty sure the contracts illustrate that, but I felt like Malls was saying bump the contracts, because at the end of the day, we're friends. And that's why I said earlier, you shouldn't mix business with pleasure. You shouldn't mix business with friendship or family, because the lines are going to get blurry, and you're just developing a problem that may not blow up in your face now, but at some point of time it's going to blow up, and then you're going to be at the Fort Road. Okay, now where do we go from here? I felt like Joe Budden handled when basically he told Rory, take a couple of podcasts off. And I think he was looking at it as, let me come to him as a friend. As family, I feel like you should take a couple of days off. Which in reality, he should have treated it like he was saying in the Shaking the Tree episode. It's my business. Okay? It's my brand. It's my name. Okay? At the end of the day. And I'm your boss. And there are procedures to boss to employee. All right? And he should have started the communication between boss and employee weeks ago, till you got into the final point of, well, okay, nothing is working. Let me we're going to suspend you with pay until we can get this ironed out. I felt like that's the road Joe Budden and Rory should have taken. All right. But there was I felt like Joe Budden was coming at him as a friend, as family, but not as a boss. And I felt like Joe Budden felt like he was being dissed by Rory when Rory questions it. Okay? On the other hand, with Maul, he's saying, look, at the end of the day, he doesn't care about the money. He just, he felt like things should have been handled differently. And he just wants a clear understanding and respect, which is, to me, when you check out his tweets and we check him out on how he does in the social media streets, he's not really illustrating that. If you don't care about the money, then why would you post money bags emojis? If you don't care about the money, then how come every time on social media when you speak, it has something to, it's always surrounding finances and money. In the Shaking the Tree episode, you was talking about, look, I want a clear understanding of what's going on. Why is this? Why are we not pursuing that? Pretty much illustrating how Joe does business as far as the direction of the Joe Budden podcast. I feel like Rory and Maul also are upset at Joe Budden with the Spotify deal. I made a video about this, about Joe Budden leaving Spotify. And remember in that video, I told you guys that I felt like Rory and Maul they were pretty ticked off about Joe saying, okay, F Spotify, and we're going to do things differently. When they had that Spotify deal, everybody was eating, plus more. The money was flowing in. The money was coming. I don't think they're making the same type of money as they were making with the Spotify deal, in my humble opinion. And I feel like ever since they left Spotify, Rory and Mal are looking at Joe differently. Okay? So I don't believe Mal when he says it's not about the money, when it has everything to do with the money. The arguments, the clashing, the back and forth, the snapping at, and I'm not talking about the final podcast before Rory went on take a couple of podcasts off, and it ended up being almost a month. They was having beef even before that point. From the point where they ended their partnership with Spotify, that's when you saw you heard snippets, and you saw snippets of there may be a problem down the road, and the problem happened. Okay, so I feel like all this has to do with the direction the podcast is going, how they don't have any say-so on what business decisions or business moves we can, as far as they don't have any type of say-so or final say-so on where the podcast is going. If this was put to a vote and say, okay, let's put it to a vote. Should we stay with Spotify or should we not stay with Spotify? Joe would have been voted out. If you're talking about those three, because Rory loved the Spotify deal. Mal loved the Spotify deal. They was making plenty of coin with the Spotify deal. When you look at Joe Budden, he already got his money. He's got bank. Okay? So it's not a big deal to Joe Budden. Yeah, he would have loved to make the money, but he already has money. These two cats are not on Joe Budden's level when it comes to finances. And I feel like that was the start of the problem. Another thing on the Shaking the Tree episode, and you can tell Joe Budden had a hidden message when he was talking about shaking the tree. And he was basically leading to this point until Mal and Rory stopped him in his tracks. And he was basically saying, in a nutshell, just because y'all have problems, so what? And the interpretation is, just because y'all don't like it, so what? It's not because at the end of the day, you two guys don't have enough equity. You don't have any type of position to dictate what direction this podcast is going. It's Joe Budden and Joe Budden alone who can make those decisions. And then he was talking about self-entitlement. When Rory and Mal talking about you should, you owe us that. The word owe us it's a word that can be a trigger word, in my humble opinion, particularly when people don't perceive you at that level. We all have friends, right? We don't treat our friends the exact same way. We treat some of our friends differently from our other friends. All right? And whatever type of relationship you have with your friends, you never heard the terminology of you owe me. You owe me, it can be perceived as a dirty word. It can be perceived as entitlement. Because if that was the case, then your contract would be laced with that argument of, it will be laced to that argument to, yeah, I do owe you. But you guys signed the contract. No one stuck a gun in your heads, and you knew full blown going in, you already had a relationship with Joe Budden. You know how Joe Budden operates. You've seen Joe Budden operate. You got so much history with him But these two guys think that we're different. We are above the fray. He's not going to treat us like he have treated other former employees, other hosts, other networks. When has he ever demonstrated that he treats people differently? So, for you going in thinking that we're different from everybody else, because we done had X amount of years with him, and we've been riding with him since the beginning of time, he's going to treat us differently from everybody else? No, he's treating you exactly how he treats everybody else. Joe Budden is an opportunist, okay? Joe Budden, to Joe Budden, people are numbers to him. That's why when they was in the episode, he would say, yeah, I respect everybody. I respect strangers on the street, but I don't owe anybody respect. Respect is earned, not given. And in some of those, and in that episode alone, if you heard the undertones of Rory and Mal, they felt like they deserve respect. No, it's earned. It's either you're respected or not. And respected is demonstrated in a multitude of ways. Look at your contract. Does your contract illustrate that he respects you, that he treats you as an equal? Look at your contract. Look at all the business decisions as far as with Joe Budden, with the Joe Budden podcast. When he left Spotify, do you feel like your wisdom and your say-so matters to Joe Budden? So, Rory, in between this episode, he was talking about, what about when you was with Complex? Do you think Complex respected you? Well, I mean, the point of them abandoning them leaving the podcast? And then Rory said, well, did you leave did you leave Complex? Which we all know this story. Joe Budden gambled on himself. He played against the cards. The cards were stacking against Joe Budden. Joe Budden made this argument that, look, they wanted an extra day out of him, which was Friday, and they was going to use that day for advertisers to line their pockets, but not so much of DJ Academics and Joe Budden's. And that was the disagreement right there, the Friday episode. He wanted a cut in those sponsorship deals, and Complex says no. So Joe Budden played out his contract, and when his contract was up, he left. He didn't abandon Complex, okay? And when Rory was saying this, Joe Budden said that what you guys did and what I did with Complex is two totally different things, which I can agree with Joe Budden. And I'm not no huge Joe Budden fan. Let's just go ahead and get that on out of the way. But I can agree with him and say, yeah, that is different, because he finished the rest of his contract. You guys are still under contract, and you guys left. Now, they're going to tell you, well, you knew that we was going to leave. Yeah, but you guys were going to leave regardless. I feel like that's the missing ingredient a lot of people are not aware of. Rory and Mal was going to leave regardless, with or without Joe Budden's blessing. Because they were saying to themselves, well, what he's going to do? Terminate our contracts? Fire us? Is that what Joe Budden going to do? Particularly when they got so many years on their contract. And particularly when you look at Joe Budden's history, he's not known to do anything like that. He's not going to eat money just to fire those two guys. Now, Mal was talking about how he didn't watch the episodes of Ice, and I forgot the other guy's name. I apologize. He felt like that was like a slap in the face. He was he was really discrediting those two individuals, Ice and I forgot the other guy's name. I apologize. Which I watched those episodes, and they were pretty. They was okay. They was okay. If y'all want to say mid, yeah, I can agree with you on that. Yeah, they probably mid, but they was pretty much the same as with Rory and Mal. People really watch the podcast just to hear what ridiculous thing Joe Budden says. You know, Joe Budden's like Skip Bayless. You put Skip Bayless with anybody else, you know, people are going to watch the show simply just to hear what the hell Skip is going to say that's going to be ridiculous or totally left field, okay? Or it could be interesting. And then that's what Joe Budden is. That's Joe Budden's stick. You know, people don't watch or listen to the Joe Budden podcast to hear the perspective of Rory and Mal, which they really just co-sign or disown whatever Joe Budden says, but they don't put any type of facts behind why they feel that way or why they don't feel it that way, why they agree with them, why they disagree with them. It's just circle talk. Okay? They're not making appealing arguments where you go, wow, Rory, yeah, that was deep. That was so deep. I never thought of it that way. Mal, wow, that was interesting. You know what? You do have a point or two about that. Okay? It's always a straightforward answer. Okay? It doesn't have a lot of perspective in it. Okay? And, you know, and I'm not hating on Rory and Mal, but I feel like you could take those two guys out and place them with two other guys, and you're going to still get the same type of chemistry and the same type of podcast, because everybody wants to see what the hell Joe Budden's going to say next. You know, how many Joe Budden fans say, oh, I really listen to the Joe Budden podcast because of Rory and Mal, when they don't even say a lot to begin with. Okay? You are really fooling yourself, and I know people are going to say in the comment section, oh, man, I listen to the Joe Budden podcast. I want to hear what Rory got to say. I want to hear the intellect of Mal. You know, nobody says that stuff. Now, you probably would say, well, I listen to the Joe Budden podcast because when Joe Budden's wrong, Mal and Rory will be on his neck. Okay? But without Joe Budden, these guys are not magic. These guys are not the reason why you would go listen or see the podcast. And that's what I mean when I say, if you substitute those guys and replace them with two other guys, I mean, you still get that same type of back and forth flow. You still get the same, and you may get a different perspective. You know, if you replace them with two other guys that actually would say something instead of either agreeing and disagreeing with Joe Budden, okay, you might have something totally different and something totally better. I feel like these guys are replaceable. Okay, and the only reason why they're still on the podcast is because, you know, look, Joe Budden loves these guys. Okay, and they have some history with one another, and you know, Mal, he can say whatever. I don't care about podcasting. You know, that may be true, but you love that money. Because if y'all look at, you don't have to take my word for it, but when the episode when I forgot the name of the episode, where Joe Budden talked in detail of why he wasn't going to renew with Spotify, if you look at their faces, the faces tell you everything. They were not pleased with Joe Budden's decision of exiting stage left from Spotify. You don't have to take my word for it. Go look at the episode yourself. Now, there was some pushback from those two cats. Okay? They didn't just be a yes man and just say yeah. No, there was a pushback, but it is what it is. Guys, I'm done. I'll holler at you guys later. Deuces.